Imagine a silence so heavy, it feels like a physical weight pressing against your chest. A silence that does not merely lack sound, but actively consumes it. It is the 9th century, and the sun has long since abandoned this corner of the world, retreating far beyond the jagged horizon, and leaving behind a sky the color of cold, beaten iron. You are standing in the absolute center of a frozen void, an expanse where the concept of time seems to have crystallized along with the moisture in the air. The first thing you realize is that the atmosphere here is a living predator. The air doesn't just touch your skin. It bites. Numbing, crystalline needles of frost line your throat with every breath you take, turning the simple act of respiration into a conscious, stinging effort. Your world has suddenly shrunk to the rhythmic, sharp crack of your own boots against the frozen snow crust, a lonely, brittle sound that echoes into an indifference so vast it feels eternal. This is not a landscape designed for human life. It is a world of monochrome extremes, where the white of the snow and the charcoal gray of the sky bleed into one another until the horizon itself disappears. You look down at your hands, and even through layers of thick mittens you can feel the warmth being sucked out of your marrow, as if the earth itself is reaching up to claim whatever heat you have left. Yet, somewhere ahead, buried beneath massive mounds of earth and frozen turf, a flicker of life is defying the entire Arctic winter. You see them now, the low, hump-backed shapes of Viking longhouses huddling against the tundra like ancient, sleeping beasts. They do not stand tall against the wind. They crouch low, bowing to the power of the north. As you begin to move through the knee-deep drifts, the wind begins its mournful, low-frequency howl. It is a sound that has no beginning and no end, a constant vibration that, stripped of all warmth, seeks out any microscopic gap in your clothing with surgical precision. The wind carries the scent of nothing. No trees, no flowers, only the sterile, metallic smell of deep ice. Your fingers are turning into stiff, pale stones, and the brutal reality of the 9th century begins to sink into your consciousness. Out here, survival is not a choice or a right. It is a constant, desperate negotiation with a nature that does not know your name. You glance at the settlement, noting the lack of movement. There are no chimneys, no bright invitations of orange light spilling from windows. Instead, there is only a ghostly, shimmering haze of heat escaping through the thick, frozen thatch of the roofs. A silent, shivering signal that someone, somehow, has mastered the art of staying warm in a world made of ice. Your survival instinct pulls you toward the largest of these structures. It looks less like a house, and more like an upturned ship buried in the earth, its sides reinforced with thick layers of cut turf and stone to repel the biting gales. You reach the entrance, a heavy iron-bound oak door that looks as though it hasn't been opened in weeks. You can feel the vibration of the storm against the wood, a relentless drumming of ice pellets. But as you lean closer, the sterile scent of the wilderness begins to fade. It is replaced by something thick, intoxicating, and strange, a heavy aroma drifting through the narrow cracks of the doorframe. It is the smell of damp wool, aged timber, and the deep, earthy musk of a wood smoke that has been burning for generations. This is the scent of a hidden world, a sanctuary carved out of the frost, waiting to pull you in from the edge of the void. It is the smell of safety, a heavy curtain of warmth waiting to wrap around your frozen soul and still the shivering of your bones. You reach for the cold iron handle, your heart hammering against your ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer primal need for shelter. As you pull the door open just an inch, the roar of the Arctic wind is instantly severed, replaced by a low, rhythmic hum of life that has been vibrating in this darkness for 1,000 years. The transition is violent in its sweetness. One moment you are a ghost in a white wasteland, and the next, you are standing on the threshold of an ancient intimacy. This is where the freezing ends, and the deep, ancient quiet begins. You step over the high threshold, leaving the iron sky behind, as the heavy oak swings shut with a thud that echoes like a heartbeat in the dark. The moment the door latches behind you, the world is severed in two. The screaming wind is cut off mid-shriek, replaced by a silence so thick and heavy, it feels like stepping into deep still water. You are standing in the entry vestibule, a narrow, cramped, transitional space designed specifically to trap the freezing air before it can penetrate the heart of the home. It is pitch black here, and the air is thick with the smell of dry earth and seasoned wood. Your heart rate begins to slow, reacting to the sudden absence of the gale. As you move forward, guided by a faint amber glow peeking through a second heavy curtain of animal hides, you feel the temperature rise, not in a sudden burst, but in a gradual, humid embrace. You push past the heavy furs, and the full scale of the Viking Longhouse reveals itself. It is a long, low tunnel of shadow and flickering light, stretching nearly 100 feet into the gloom. The architecture is skeletal, with massive, soot-stained timber pillars rising like the ribs of a great whale to support a vaulted roof lost in darkness. There are no windows here, no openings to the sky save for a few narrow slits high in the roof that allow a thin, ghostly veil of smoke to drift upward. The floor beneath your feet is not wood or stone, but hard-packed earth, worn smooth by generations of footsteps, and covered in a fragrant layer of fresh rushes and dried heather. This floor acts as a massive thermal battery, absorbing the heat of the day and releasing it slowly through the night. You notice that the room is not a single open space, but is divided into long raised earthen platforms running along both walls, creating a central aisle that feels like a sacred path through the heart of the settlement. The light comes from a series of small soapstone oil lamps and a single low-burning hearth in the distance, casting long, dancing shadows that make the very walls seem to breathe. You feel a sudden, profound sense of enclosure, a feeling that you have entered a fortress built not against men, but against the sheer, crushing weight of the natural world. Here, every beam, every stone, and every handful of earth has been placed with a single, obsessive purpose: to hold the line against the frost. You take a step further into the warmth, and the tension in your shoulders, which you didn't even realize you were holding, finally begins to dissolve. You are no longer a target for the wind. You are a guest of the earth. The air here is still, carrying the muffled sounds of the household, the crackle of a drying log, the rustle of straw, and the distant, rhythmic breathing of people you cannot yet see. You realize that in this place, the concept of a house is gone. This is a living, breathing organism, a collective lung that keeps the cold at bay through the sheer force of its design. As you move deeper into the shadows, the transition is complete. You have left the iron sky behind and entered the womb of the north, a place where the darkness is not an enemy, but a warm, protective cloak. The path ahead is narrow and lit by the softest of glows, leading you toward the center of this ancient world, where the true secret of survival waits to be found. As you move further into the heart of the Longhouse, passing the secondary curtain of heavy, salt-cured walrus hides, the air undergoes a profound and miraculous transformation. It loses the sharp, predatory edge of the Arctic frost, that thin, blade-like quality that cuts into the lungs and becomes something heavy, textured, and remarkably alive. Your respiratory system, which had been constricted by the iron grip of the sub-zero temperatures outside, finally begins to expand to its full capacity. Each breath you draw in is a thick, humid draft of survival itself. This is the first layer of true safety, a dense, golden atmosphere that clings to your skin like a second garment, carrying the multifaceted scent of a world that stubbornly refuses to go cold. You find yourself standing in a space where the very molecules of the air seem to vibrate with the collective pulse of a living community. In the center of this long vaulted hall, the light is filtered through a haze of ancient wood smoke, creating a visual depth that feels like standing at the bottom of a warm amber sea. You inhale the deep, primal musk of the hearth, not the frantic, roaring fire of a modern furnace, but a slow, rhythmic smoldering of peat bricks and seasoned oak that has been nurtured and guarded for weeks without end. Woven into this smoke is the aromatic signature of the North. The lanolin-rich scent of damp wool tunics drying in the heat, the sweet fermented tang of honey mead lingering in the rafters, and the faint earthy aroma of dried yarrow and St. John's wort hanging in bundles from the soot-blackened beams. You find yourself standing near a low stone-lined pit where the embers glow with a steady pulsing orange light, casting long liquid shadows that make the massive timber pillars seem to sway in a slow-motion dance. A wooden cup is placed into your hands, a vessel carved from a single piece of birch burl, its surface worn to a silk-like smoothness by decades of human touch. As you take a sip of the warm, spiced liquid inside, you can feel the heat spreading from your chest to your fingertips, a slow-motion explosion of comfort that anchors you to this specific moment in time. The internal thaw begins not just in your limbs, but in your mind. The darkness here is not a void to be feared. It is a sanctuary, a thick velvet cloak that hides the brutal, white reality of the blizzard and wraps the community in a shared, golden dimness. In the modern world, we have forgotten the utility of shadow, but for the souls standing in the 9th century, these shadows are a shield, a psychological barrier that reinforces the boundary between the US of the firelight and the it of the frozen wilderness. You lean back against a thick, unyielding timber post, feeling the immense strength of the tree that holds up the weight of the turf roof. The floor beneath you is not a cold, dead surface, but a living insulation padded with thick layers of soft moss, dried hay, and aromatic rushes that cushion your weight and isolate you from the permafrost below. In this space, the concept of home is stripped back to its most essential, prehistoric elements. A roof that does not break under the weight of the sky, a fire that does not die in the night, and a silence that is shared with others. The chaotic violence of the winter is reduced to a distant, muffled scratching against the 6-foot thick walls, a sound that only serves to make the interior feel even more impenetrable. You are no longer fighting. You are simply existing, suspended in a warm amber pocket of time, where the only requirement is to breathe and let the frost melt away from your spirit. The hearth fire whispers a low crackling promise that as long as this ember glows, the world remains whole and the darkness remains outside. This is the safe harbor, the place where the frantic pace of survival stops and the slow, deep work of resting begins. You feel your eyelids growing heavy, synchronized with the steady, ancient heartbeat of the fire, as you finally surrender to the profound grace of being warm, being fed, and being home. As you settle deeper into the dim, flickering expanse of the longhouse, your sense of smell begins to decode a complex symphony of survival. This is not the sterile, artificial cleanliness of the modern world. It is a dense, layered, and profoundly alive atmosphere. The first layer you encounter is the heavy, comforting scent of lanolin from raw wool tunics draped over the crossbeams to dry. It is a musky, warm aroma, reminiscent of sheep huddling on a frost-covered hillside, carrying the dampness of the Arctic mist as it slowly evaporates under the persistent heat of the hidden embers. Woven into this is the fragrance of pine and oak that has been seasoned by decades of wood smoke. The massive timber pillars supporting the roof are more than just wood. They are archives of scent, saturated with resinous sap, and the faint, salty ghost of sea spray from their former lives as dragon ships. Whenever the internal heat rises, their dark, soot-polished surfaces release a whisper of ancient forests, a steady, grounded smell that anchors the entire room. You draw a deep breath, and in the lower layers of the air, near the floor, you catch the scent of damp earth and dried heather. These floor coverings do more than cushion your step. They release a soft floral sweetness of a meadow frozen in time, a quiet reminder of the brief summer and the life sleeping beneath the snow. But the most vital element the one that binds every other scent into a feeling of absolute security, is the smell of living presence. It is the warm, humid breath of the livestock at the far end of the house, the scent of hay fermenting gently in their stomachs, and the unmistakable aroma of humanity, the honest musk of hard labor, the rendered bear grease used to preserve leather, and the sharp, clean sting of burning juniper twigs. None of this is overwhelming. Instead, it creates a tactile atmosphere so thick, you feel as though you could reach out and touch it. It is the scent of a colossal, breathing entity protecting you, a cocoon of warmth, woven from breath and sheer endurance. You close your eyes, letting these molecules of life fill your mind. They tell the story of slow-cooked stews in earthenware pots, of calloused hands weaving the very fabric that shields you, and of a community stubbornly maintaining the pulse of life in an ocean of ice. The lethal cold outside feels 1,000 miles away, utterly defeated by the density of this human sanctuary. You realize you are no longer a stranger who just stepped in from the storm. You have become a part of the lifeblood circulating through this dark, warm heart. As you surrender your rhythm to the breathing of the house, you understand that the only light that truly matters is not the sun above, but the glowing crimson core beating at the center of this room. At the very center of this elongated subterranean world lies the hearth, the undisputed sun of the Longhouse. But it is not the roaring, theatrical blaze you might expect from a modern imagination. This is the sulking fire, a masterclass in ancient thermal management and a living testament to the Viking philosophy of endurance. It lives within a long rectangular pit, lined with heavy soot-stained fieldstones that have absorbed the heat of 1,000 nights. This fire does not dance with frantic energy. It breathes with a slow subterranean pulse that mirrors the hibernating earth outside. The fuel is a dense, meticulously layered mixture of dried peat bricks and seasoned birch, materials chosen not for their ability to flare up, but for their stubborn, agonizing slowness in surrendering their energy. The light it emits is a deep, rhythmic crimson, a heavy amber glow that doesn't pierce the darkness so much as it stains it, turning the air into a thick, liquid gold. You move closer, feeling the gravity of the hearth pull at your tired limbs. As you settle onto the edge of the raised earthen platform, the air undergoes a final, profound change. It becomes heavy with the scent of carbon, ancient soil, and the mineral tang of heated stone. This fire is temperamental, almost sentient in its quietude. It has been fed, banked, and watched for months without a single moment of abandonment. For to the people of the 9th century, an extinguished hearth was not merely a cold room, it was a spiritual catastrophe, a broken link in the chain of survival that bound the ancestors to the living. You watch as a woman moves with practiced, silent economy, her silhouette a long shadow against the timber pillars. She uses a blackened iron poker to gently bank the fine white ash over the glowing core, a ritual of preservation. She's not trying to make the fire larger. She's trying to trap its soul, forcing the infrared heat to radiate horizontally across the floor, rather than allowing the precious energy to escape upward into the void of the roof. This is why the atmosphere in the Longhouse feels so pressurized, so incredibly dense. The smoke does not rise in a sharp, vertical line. Instead, it hangs in a protective, hazy blanket just above head height, creating a secondary ceiling of warm, recycled air that prevents the frost from descending from the thatch. You can feel this warmth pressing against your skin, a soft, invisible weight that begins to unknot the deep tension in your muscles. The sounds of this fire are as muffled as its light. There is the occasional sharp, crystalline snap of a hidden pocket of resin deep within a birch log, followed by a long, low hiss as the moisture in a peat brick turns to steam, sounding like the distant exhale of a great beast. It is a domestic white noise, a sonic anchor that tells your nervous system that the world is still in balance, that the perimeter is secure, and that for tonight, the ice has lost its grip. As the stones of the hearth pit begin to radiate against your calves, you feel a deep tissue warmth, the kind of heat that doesn't just warm the skin, but travels through muscle and sinew to settle in the very marrow of your bones. In the modern world, we treat heat as a commodity, a digital setting on a wall. Here, heat is a sacred guest, a fragile miracle that must be courted, respected, and understood. You find yourself staring into that pulsing crimson core, your eyes growing heavy as the flickering shadows play across the massive support beams, making the wood grain appear to move like slow-flowing water. The fire doesn't demand your active attention. It anchors your consciousness, providing a singular focal point in a world of midnight. It is a shared sun for the community, a point of convergence where stories are felt rather than told. You realize that the sulking nature of this fire is, in fact, its greatest strength. By refusing to burn bright and fast, it ensures that there will be a glow to greet the gray dawn. It is a lesson in patience, a reminder that in the heart of the Arctic winter, the goal is not to conquer the darkness with violence, but to endure it with a steady, unwavering light. The warmth on your face is soft, like a phantom touch, lulling you into a state of profound meditative stillness. The boundary between your breath and the rise and fall of the embers begins to blur. You are no longer watching the fire. You are drifting within its rhythm, suspended in a warm, amber pocket of time where the only requirement is to exist. The heavy scent of the peat smoke wraps around you like a heavy wool blanket, guiding you deeper into the womb of the house, where the true silence of the north waits to take hold. The woman who has been tending the sulking fire, her movements as fluid and silent as eyes. The shadows themselves reaches toward a carved wooden shelf and retrieves a heavy curved vessel. Without a word, she leans across the gap between the hearth and the raised platform, placing it firmly into your hands. It is a drinking horn, a massive, ancient thing taken from a long-dead aurochs, its surface polished to a glass-like sheen that feels cold and alien against your skin at first. But as you wrap your fingers around its tapered length, the horn begins to drink in the ambient heat of the room, quickly becoming a warm extension of your own body. You look down and see the intricate silver work around the rim, interlocking serpents and stylized wolves that seem to writhe and coil in the flickering crimson light of the tallow lamps, as if the object itself were breathing. As you lift the vessel to your lips, the scent of the contents rises to meet you in a thick, golden cloud of aroma. It is a complex, intoxicating perfume that smells of things that should not exist in an Arctic winter. You inhale the deep, floral sweetness of fermented honey, the resinous sharp of wild bog myrtle, and a faint, medicinal undertone of dried yarrow and meadowsweet. This is the mead, the liquid amber of the north, and in this frozen world, it is far more than a simple beverage. It is a ritual of radical hospitality, a silent, sacred contract that signals you are no longer a ghost wandering the storm, but a guest of the house, protected by its laws and its walls. You take your first cautious sip, and the liquid is surprisingly cool on the tongue, yet as it passes through your throat, a slow-motion explosion of warmth begins to radiate outward from your chest. It tastes of distant, impossible summers of bees humming in the purple heather of a high plateau, and the heavy sweetness of sun-drenched meadows that have been buried under the ice for months. The sweetness is not cloying. It is balanced by a profound earthy bitterness from the forest herbs, a grounding flavor that seems to clear the fog of exhaustion from your mind and replace it with a floating, ethereal clarity. There's no rush here, no pressure to speak or to explain your presence. In the 9th century, silence is not an awkward void. It is a precious commodity, a form of respect saved for those who understand the weight of the winter. As you hold the horn, you find yourself tracing the grain of the bone with your thumb, feeling the microscopic ridges and scars of the animal's life. Each sip seems to slow your heart rate further, sensing your internal rhythm with the heavy, unhurried pulse of the longhouse. The golden liquid catches the reflection of the hearth fire, dancing in the curve of the horn like a captive star. You realize that the mead is acting as a bridge, connecting your freezing physical body to the spiritual core of the home. The knots of anxiety that have been tightened by the howling wind outside begin to unravel, one by one, until your shoulders finally drop and your back finds the solid, soot-darkened timber of the support pillar. The shadows on the far wall grow longer, stretching out like the fingers of a friendly giant, as the community around you settles into their own quiet communions. The drinking horn is passed from hand to hand, a physical link between souls, ensuring that even in the deepest, most isolating reaches of the polar night, no one truly drinks alone. You lean your head back, the lingering taste of honey and herbs still warming your palate, and you realize that you have found something far more valuable than gold or silver. You have found a moment of absolute, undisturbed peace, a state of grace where the only requirement is to exist and let the warmth of the honey wine guide you toward a deeper, more ancient state of rest. The world outside, with its lethal iron sky and predatory frost, has faded into a distant, muffled memory, while here, within the amber curve of the horn, lies the concentrated essence of the sun, waiting to carry you into the heart of the night. The true brilliance of the Viking Longhouse lies not in its ability to generate heat, but in its stubborn, near-miraculous refusal to let that heat escape. As you sit within this dim sanctuary, you find yourself reaching out, your hand hovering for a moment before pressing firmly against the interior wall. You expect the biting, skeletal sting of frozen stone, or the damp chill of a cave, but instead your fingers sink into a texture that is dry, yielding, and strangely, profoundly warm. This is the secret of the thermos architecture, a masterclass in 9th century insulation that would leave even the most advanced modern engineers in awe. To the people of the North, the earth was not merely something to be conquered or walked upon. It was a living, breathing blanket they wrapped around their lives to survive the impossible. These walls are nearly 6 feet thick, a massive subterranean sandwich of natural materials meticulously layered to defy the laws of the Arctic. As you run your palm along the surface, you are feeling a history of labor and observation. The outer shell of the house is armored with heavy blocks of turf, cut directly from the frozen tundra. These blocks were laid with the roots still intertwined, forming a biological shield that actually grows stronger as the frost binds it together into a single, unyielding mass. Within that outer shell lies a secondary wall of wattle and daub interwoven hazel and willow branches plastered with a dense mixture of clay, straw, and animal hair. This combination creates millions of microscopic air pockets, tiny chambers of stillness that trap the radiant heat from the hearth and the collective breath of the inhabitants, holding it close to the skin of the community. You realize with a start that you are not just inside a building, you are standing within a hollowed-out hill, a sanctuary of soil and grass, engineered to turn a lethal, external atmosphere into a gentle, controlled climate. There is a profound, almost spiritual silence that radiates from these earthbound walls. They do not creak like timber frames under the pressure of the gale, nor do they echo with the cold hardness of stone. Instead, they swallow sound, creating an acoustic intimacy that renders the screaming blizzard outside into nothing more than a faint, rhythmic whisper, a ghost of a sound that only serves to highlight the safety of the interior. You look up toward the soaring, vaulted roof, where the massive rafters are covered in thick layers of birch bark and rye thatch. Over decades of survival, these materials have turned a deep, oily black, saturated with the soot of the hearth. This soot is not seen as waste here. It is a vital sealant, waterproofing the thatch against the heavy spring melts and discouraging insects or rodents from nesting in the precious insulation. Every single element of this structure, from the lowest sod to the highest beam, serves a dual purpose, a perfect ancient marriage of biology and engineering, born from 1,000 years of trial and error in the heart of the frost. As you lean your shoulder against a main support pillar, made of soot-darkened oak, you feel the solidity of the earth rising up through the timber to meet you. In a world where the horizon is a shifting, treacherous blur of white and gray, these walls represent the only true permanence. They are the physical manifestation of the community's collective will to endure against an environment that wants them gone. You find yourself mesmerized by the organic patterns of the wattlework peeking through the clay, a reminder that every inch of this fortress was built by hand, bucket by bucket, sod by sod. The air trapped between the walls, and the fire stays perfectly still, a pocket of heavy golden warmth that lulls your nervous system into a state of deep, grounded relaxation. You are no longer an observer. You are being cradled by the very ground itself, protected by a fortress of grass and shadow that knows exactly how to keep the winter at bay. This is the architectural soul of the North, a home that does not fight the earth, but becomes an extension of its quiet, enduring strength. As the massive, 6-foot-thick walls of turf and earth anchor you to the ground, you begin to realize that the darkness of the Longhouse is not a void of silence, but a rich, multi-layered tapestry of low-frequency vibrations. Now that your eyes have surrendered to the dim amber glow of the hearth, your ears begin to expand, tuning into the subterranean music of a community at rest. This is a prehistoric white noise, a collection of sounds so ancient and rhythmic that they seem to speak directly to the primitive centers of your brain, whispering that you are safe, you are enclosed, and you are not alone. The air itself feels heavy with sound, carrying the muffled, oceanic drone of life, enduring against the backdrop of an Arctic midnight. From the deep shadows of the raised wooden platforms, you hear the first layer of this symphony, the soft, melodic rise and fall of a human voice. It is a woman's lullaby, but it is not sung for an audience. It is hummed with a closed mouth, a series of repetitive, tonal shifts that mimic the swaying of a ship on a calm sea or the steady flickering of the peat fire. There are no sharp consonants to startle the mind, no sudden leaps in pitch to demand attention, only a soothing, hypnotic drone that bypasses the conscious ego and anchors the soul to the present moment. This humming is a thread of continuity, a vocal hearth that has been passed down through generations of mothers, designed to knit the frayed nerves of children and elders alike back into a state of wholeness. Interwoven with this human melody is the ambient heartbeat of the Longhouse itself, the structural groans of a building that is alive in its own right. You hear the slow, heavy sigh of the massive soot-darkened oak beams as they settle under the staggering weight of the accumulated snow on the roof. It is a deep, wooden sound, like a giant shifting comfortably in its sleep, a reminder of the immense strength holding the sky at bay. Below this, there is the dry, crisp rustle of the floor, covering fresh rushes, dried heather, and aromatic meadowsweet. Whenever someone shifts their weight or a child turns in their furs, the floor breathes a scent of summer and a sound like wind through autumn leaves. But here, the wind is contained, harnessed, and harmless. Occasionally, the silence is punctuated by the rhythmic, percussive elements of 9th century life. You might hear the distant hollow thud of a hand-carved wooden bowl being set upon a table, or the metallic rhythmic click of a loom being adjusted in the shadows. These are not distractions. They are the acoustic markers of a world that is functioning with perfect, unhurried economy. Your ears soon find the most comforting sound of all, the rhythmic, synchronized breathing of dozens of living creatures. From the far end of the hall, you hear the slow, pressurized exhale of a cow and the gentle, rhythmic chewing of cud, a sound of profound contentment. Closer to you, the soft, even respirations of the people on the benches create a collective lung, a shared rhythm that begins to pull your own heart rate down to match the pulse of the house. There are no ticking clocks here, no hum of electricity, no mechanical interruptions to fracture your focus. Time is measured only by the crackle of a drying birch log and the slow, inevitable dimming of the tallow lamps. The darkness seems to amplify the warmth of these noises, turning the Longhouse into a giant, resonant instrument that vibrates with the frequency of survival. You feel the sound in your bones, more than you hear it in your ears. It is a sonic shield, a heavy curtain of vibration that reinforces the boundary between the lethal, screaming void of the blizzard outside and the warm, golden sanctuary within. As you lean your head back against the solid timber, the lullaby in the distance fades into a low, indistinct murmur, merging with the steady hiss of the embers. The world has shrunk to the span of these four walls, and within this space, everything is intentional, everything is slow, and everything is safe. You find yourself drifting on this sea of soft murmurs and wooden echoes, guided by an ancient, steady cadence that tells you the night is long, the fire is banked, and there is nothing left to do but breathe. This is the ultimate luxury of the 9th century. The ability to vanish into a soundscape of pure, undisturbed peace, where the darkness is a warm, protective cloak, and the silence is a song of home. Transitioning from the deep, velvet oblivion of a Viking night into the reality of a winter morning is not a sudden event. It is a slow, rhythmic surfacing. As the first microscopic hints of gray light begin to filter through the heavy soot-stained thatch of the roof, you find yourself waking not to the sound of an alarm, but to the taste of the air itself. The atmosphere inside the Longhouse has reached its peak density during the night. It is a thick, opaque veil of wood smoke, recycled breath, and the humid warmth of huddled livestock. This is the blue hour of the 9th century, a time when the world feels suspended between the ancestral dreams of the dark and the brutal requirements of the frost. You lie perfectly still beneath your layers of heavy wool and reindeer hide, watching the way the smoke curls in the rafters, forming phantom shapes that drift and dissolve in the dim amber light of the dying embers. Your first conscious breath is a meditation. The air is heavy, flavored with the carbon of the peat fire and the faint, sweet scent of the dried meadowsweet on the floor. It doesn't bite like the air outside. Instead, it blankets your lungs, a warm and familiar weight that tells your body it has survived another night of the great cold. You listen to the house, waking up around you. It begins with a soft, rhythmic shuffling from the far end of the hall, the cattle, shifting their weight, their hooves thudding gently against the earth, followed by a long, low huff of steam as a bull exhales into the chill. Then comes the human element, the soft creak of a wooden bed frame, the muffled yawn of a child, and the dry, crisp rustle of straw as someone rises to tend the heart of the home. The morning ritual of the fire is a sacred, silent performance. You watch through half-closed eyes as an elder moves toward the hearth pit. There are no words spoken. The morning is too fragile for conversation. With a pair of blackened iron tongs, they gently peel back the protective layer of white ash that has slept over the embers all night. Beneath that gray shroud, the crimson core of the fire is revealed, still pulsing, still stubborn, a tiny piece of the sun that has been kept alive through sheer willpower. They add a few thin shavings of birch bark, which catch with a sharp, enthusiastic crackle, sending a fresh, resinous perfume into the room. This sound is the true start button of the Viking world, a sonic signal that the boundary of safety has been renewed for another day. As the fire begins to grow, the light changes from a deep, bruised purple to a warm, hazy gold. The smoke, which had settled in a low canopy during the night, begins to stir and rise, drawn toward the narrow smoke slits high in the gables. You feel the temperature in the room begin to climb again, a slow tide of warmth that coaxes your limbs out of their frozen stillness. You reach out a hand from beneath the furs, feeling the sudden contrast of the air. It is cool, but not lethal, a reminder that the fortress of turf and stone has held the line. There is a profound sense of continuity in this moment. You are waking up exactly as your ancestors did 1,000 years ago, in a world where the morning is not a race, but a slow, deliberate gathering of strength. The Longhouse at this hour feels like a cathedral of survival. The massive oak pillars, polished by generations of shoulders, catch the morning glow and seem to radiate a strength that is both physical and spiritual. You realize that the smoke you are waking in is not a nuisance. It is the lifeblood of the house, a visible manifestation of the heat that keeps the Arctic at bay. It is a reminder that in the 9th century to breathe smoke is to be alive. You take a final moment of stillness, letting the rhythm of the rising fire and the waking household anchor you. The world outside the heavy oak door is a white, screaming void of ice. But here, within the hazy golden womb of the Longhouse, the day begins with the smell of wood smoke and the promise of another day won against the winter. You are grounded, you are warm, and you are ready to witness the quiet, incredible labor of the morning. To understand the Viking Longhouse is to understand a sophisticated, non-linear philosophy of warmth that has been lost to the modern world of central heating and digital thermostats. In this ancient space, heat is not a commodity that you simply turn on. It is a living, flowing inhabitant that must be managed, directed, and respected through a delicate dance of physics and intuition. As you sit in the heavy amber-tinted silence of the mid-morning, you begin to perceive the invisible currents of the room. This is the philosophy of heat, a realization that survival in the north is not about fighting the cold, but about mastering the geometry of the air itself. You watch the way the smoke from the central hearth behaves, noticing that it does not simply vanish, but acts as a thermal regulator, a fluid ceiling that separates the habitable zone from the freezing void of the upper rafters. The Vikings understood that heat is a precious currency, and they engineered their homes to be the ultimate vaults for this wealth. You observe the deliberate lack of high windows or chimneys. In a modern house, a chimney is a vacuum that sucks warm air out. Here, the smoke hole or loggia is a narrow, adjustable slit high in the gables, designed to create a slight positive pressure within the hall. This pressure ensures that the cold, dense air from the outside cannot easily force its way in through the cracks of the heavy oak doors. Instead, the warm, smoke-laden air hangs in a thick, stagnant layer just above the height of a standing man. When you sit on the raised earthen benches, you are literally submerged in a pool of tempered air, protected by a canopy of wood smoke that reflects the radiant heat back down toward the floor. It is a brilliant, low-tech greenhouse effect, turning the entire longhouse into a giant, self-regulating lung. This philosophy extends to the very floor beneath your feet. You notice that the central aisle, where the fire pits are located, is set lower than the living platforms on either side. This is not merely for aesthetics. It is a thermal trap. Because cold air is heavy and sinks, any drafts that manage to penetrate the entry vestibule are funneled into the low central trench, where they are immediately warmed by the embers before they can reach the sleeping quarters. The raised benches, packed with insulating earth and covered in layers of birch bark and firs, act as massive thermal batteries. Throughout the day, they absorb the infrared energy from the hearth, and during the long sub-zero nights, they slowly release that stored warmth directly into the bodies of those resting upon them. You feel this warmth now, a steady, unhurried vibration rising from the ground, a heat that feels organic and ancient, far removed from the dry, artificial air of the future. Furthermore, the Vikings practiced a form of biological heating that blurred the lines between the human and animal kingdoms. You look toward the far end of the hall, where the partition walls separate the living quarters from the byre. The heat generated by the massive bodies of the cattle and sheep is not wasted. It is drafted into the main hall through carefully placed vents in thick timber walls. This animal caloric adds a humid, heavy layer to the atmosphere, a moist warmth that prevents the wood smoke from becoming too dry and irritating to the lungs. It is a closed-loop system of survival, where every calorie of energy, whether from a burning peat brick, a fermented bowl of porridge, or the heartbeat of a cow, is recycled and harnessed to hold the iron frost at bay. As you contemplate this invisible machinery, you realize that the philosophy of heat is also a philosophy of community. Because the warmth is concentrated in the center of the hall, The inhabitants are naturally drawn toward one another, huddled around the singular pulse of the hearth. There is no such thing as an isolated heated room. Safety is a collective experience. You find a profound comfort in this forced proximity, a sense of belonging that is physically reinforced by the temperature of the air. The Longhouse does not just keep you warm, it keeps you together. You close your eyes, letting the complex, multi-layered heat wash over you, the radiant glow of the stones, the stored warmth of the earth, and the humid breath of the livestock, all working in a silent, magnificent harmony to ensure that while the world outside may freeze into a diamond hardness, the heart of the north remains soft, golden, and infinitely alive. As you move toward the far end of the Longhouse, past the central hearth and the sleeping platforms of the high-ranking family members, the architecture begins to shift, and the air takes on a new, even denser quality. You are entering the byre, the section of the hall dedicated to the livestock. In the modern world, we draw a sharp, clinical line between the human dwelling and the animal shed. But in the 9th century North, such a division would have been a death sentence. Here, the animals are not merely property or food. They are the walking hearths, living, breathing radiators of biological heat that serve as the secondary life support system of the home. As you step onto the lower earthen floor of this section, you feel a surge of humid, heavy warmth that is noticeably different from the dry, smoky heat of the peat fire. It is a moisture-rich heat, a thick vapor of life that rises from the massive bodies of the cattle, sheep, and goats huddled together in the shadows. The scent here is primal and profoundly grounding. It is a rich, fermented bouquet of dried summer grass, damp wool, and the clean, earthy musk of large herbivores. You find a spot to lean against a heavy timber partition, and in the dim light provided by a single flickering oil lamp, you watch the silhouettes of the great long-horned cattle. They are massive, silent sentinels of the winter. Their breath comes in slow, rhythmic clouds of steam that catch the amber light, rising like ghosts toward the rafters. You listen to the sound of their existence, the rhythmic, wet grinding of teeth as they chew the cud, the occasional heavy thud of a hoof against the packed clay, and the long, pressurized exhales that sound like the bellows of a forge. This is the heartbeat of the farm, a steady, unhurried vibration that tells your nervous system that the pantry is alive, the future is secure, and the cold has failed to penetrate this deep into the sanctuary. The engineering of this biological heater is as deliberate as the construction of the stone hearth. The Vikings understood that a cow, in its resting state, generates as much heat as a small wood-burning stove. By bringing 20 or 30 head of cattle into the same structural envelope as the family, the total thermal output of the house is nearly double. The partitions between the humans and the animals are not solid walls. They are slatted timber screens that allow the humid animal-warmed air to circulate freely into the main living quarters. This moisture is vital. It prevents the wood smoke from the central fire from becoming too parched, coating the lungs of the inhabitants with a protective layer of humidity that makes the long, dark months of indoor living physically bearable. You feel this humidity on your skin now, a soft, invisible mist that uncurls the dry tension of the day. There is a profound psychological peace to be found in this proximity. To lie down in a room where you can hear the steady breathing of your wealth is the ultimate form of security. In the silence of the Arctic night, when the wind howls with a frequency that sounds like a hunting predator, the calm, indifferent chewing of the cattle is the most reassuring sound in the world. It is a testament to the cycles of nature. The grass of the summer, harvested with grueling labor under the midnight sun, is now being slowly converted into heat, milk, and life within the bellies of these creatures. You are witnessing a closed loop of survival, a perfect alchemy of the north. As you stand in the shadows of the byre, you might feel a small goat or a hound press against your leg, seeking its own share of your warmth. In this space, the hierarchy of species dissolves into a singular, shivering mass of life, all huddled together against the indifferent cruelty of the ice. The walking hearths do not complain. They do not fear the storm. They simply exist, radiating a steady 101 degrees of life force into the room. You find your own pulse, slowing to match theirs, a deep, bovine calm that settles over your spirit. The complexity of human anxiety, the worries about the future, the weight of the sagas, the fear of the gods, all of it seems to melt away in the presence of this simple, rhythmic biological endurance. You realize that you are not just a guest in a house, you are a cell in a larger multi-species organism, a part of a collective lung that breathes in the winter and breathes out a stubborn golden hope. The warmth of the cattle is the warmth of the earth itself, harnessed and brought indoors, a living shield that ensures that when the spring finally arrives, the pulse of the farm will still be beating, steady and strong, beneath the melting snow. As you settle deeper into the soft, yielding furs of the sleeping platform, you begin to notice the weight of the textiles draped over your body and the intricate construction of the garments worn by those around you. In the 9th century North, clothing is not a fashion statement. It is a sophisticated, multi-layered armor of biological engineering. This is the armor of wool, a textile technology that has been perfected over 1,000 winters to do what no modern synthetic fiber can truly replicate: to manage moisture, trap heat, and breathe in perfect synchronization with the human body. You reach out and run your fingers over the sleeve of a heavy kirtle, feeling the coarse, oily texture of the vadmal, the hand-woven wool that serves as the primary currency and the primary shield of the Viking world. It feels dense, almost like felt, a fabric that has been beaten and shrunk until it is nearly windproof, yet it remains strangely soft, carrying the lingering scent of wood smoke and sheep's lanolin. To understand the survival of the Norse, you must understand the architecture of their wool. The sheep of the north, the ancient short-tailed breeds, evolved to survive the same brutal gales that now batter the Longhouse walls. Their fleece is double-layered, a long, hair-like outer coat called tog, which is water-repellent and tough, and a downy, insulating undercoat called feel. When the Norse women spin this wool, they do not just make a thread, they create a microscopic trap for warmth. You look at the woman seated near the hearth, her spindle spinning in a blur of practiced motion. She is blending these fibers to create a garment that can shed a freezing rain on the outside while maintaining a pocket of dry golden heat against the skin. This is the first layer of the sanctuary, the one you carry with you into the storm. You begin to mentally peel back the layers of this textile armor. Against the skin lies the shift, or skyata, made of fine, bleached linen, or the softest, most carefully combed wool. This layer is designed to wick away the moisture of your own breath and sweat, preventing the deadly conductive cooling that occurs when damp fabric touches cold skin. Over this sits the tunic, a heavy, long-sleeved garment dyed with the deep, earthy reds of madder root or the sun-faded yellows of weld. This layer is the primary insulator. Its weave loose enough to trap a thick boundary layer of air that your own body heat warms to a steady 98 degrees. On top of the tunic, a heavy cloak of vadmal is pinned at the shoulder with a massive bronze brooch, a heavy structural garment that can be used as a blanket, a tent, or a shield against the driving sleet. The weight of these clothes is a comfort in itself. There is a psychological security in the heaviness of the wool, a constant, tactile reminder that you are enclosed. You watch as a hunter near the door removes his wet cloak, and you notice that even though the outer fibers are beaded with melting snow, the inner layers remain bone dry. This is the miracle of lanolin, the natural sheep's oil that the Norse deliberately leave in the wool during the spinning process. It makes the fabric naturally water-resistant and antimicrobial, a living shield that actually becomes warmer when it gets slightly damp, as the chemical reaction between water and wool fibers releases a tiny, measurable amount of heat. In a world of ice, This heat of wetting is a secret weapon of the north. Beyond the wool, there are the hides, the final, outer defense. You pull a heavy reindeer skin up to your chin, feeling the hollow core hairs that provide the world's most efficient insulation. Each hair of the reindeer is a tiny air-filled straw, creating a vacuum seal that prevents even the most predatory frost from reaching your chest. Beneath your feet, your boots are lined with dry sedge grass, a traditional insulation that can be replaced daily, ensuring that your extremities remain in a state of perpetual summer, even as sad. You walk across the permafrost. You realize that the Norse do not merely wear clothes. They inhabit a portable ecosystem, a meticulously layered fortress of hair, hide, and fiber that allows them to move through a lethal environment as if they were still sitting by the hearth. As the rhythm of the loom in the background blends with the crackle of the fire, you find yourself mesmerized by the sheer amount of human labor embedded in every thread. A single cloak represents months of shearing, washing, spinning, and weaving, thousands of hours of communal effort dedicated to the simple goal of staying warm. This is why the gift of a garment is the highest form of honor in the sagas. It is the gift of life itself. You close your eyes, feeling the heavy, scratchy, beautiful warmth of the wool pressing against you. A tactile lullaby that speaks of the sheep on the high fells, the women at the loom, and the unbreakable chain of survival that keeps the north alive. The wind may howl and the ice may thicken, but within your armor of wool, you are a sovereign of warmth, untouchable, and at peace. The true brilliance of the Viking Longhouse lies not in the silence of the void, but in the specific, rhythmic textures of its internal soundscape, and as the afternoon shadows deepen into a bruised purple, a new cadence begins to dominate the acoustic field of the hall. It is a steady, hypnotic click-clack, a percussive pulse that seems to emanate from the very marrow of the timber pillars. You turn your head slowly, your eyes tracing the origin of this sonic anchor to the far, dim corner of the house where the massive upright frame of the warp-weighted loom stands. In the flickering amber glow of the peat fire, this wooden structure looks like a silent sentinel, a sacred machine of survival that has been part of the human story since the first snow fell upon the north. This is the loom of time, and in the 9th century, its voice is the heartbeat of the community, a persistent and rhythmic reassurance that the threads of life are being held tight against the unraveling chaos of the Arctic winter. You find yourself mesmerized by the weaver, a silhouette of practiced, liquid grace moving against the hazy gold of the wood smoke that hangs in the rafters. She stands before the tall rectangular frame of the loom, her hands dancing among hundreds of vertical threads known as the warp, which hang downward like a still frozen waterfall of raw wool. To keep these threads under the perfect, singing tension required for the weaving of the heavy vadmal cloth, dozens of massive, donut-shaped stones are tied to their ends. These are the loom weights, carved from dense volcanic basalt or smooth river stones gathered during the fleeting thaw of summer. And as the weaver passes the wooden shuttle back and forth through the shed of the loom, these stones sway and collide with a soft, crystalline chime. The sound is ancient, elemental, and profoundly repetitive. It possesses a specific, low-frequency resonance that bypasses the analytical mind, speaking instead to the primitive centers of the brain that crave order and predictability. It is a domestic metronome, a rhythmic anchor that tells your nervous system that the world is in balance, that for every freezing blast of the blizzard outside, there is a counterstitch of warmth being manufactured within. The work of the weaver is a masterclass in slow-motion alchemy, a process that demands a total surrender to the passage of time. You watch as the raw, oily fleece of the sheep, still carrying the faint scent of the high summer fells and the sharp tang of the hearth, is transformed, inch by agonizing inch, into a dense, windproof fabric that will eventually shield a traveler or a child from the predatory bite of the frost. There is no hurry in her movements, for in the Longhouse, time is not measured by the ticking of a mechanical clock or the rapid movement of a digital display. Here, time is measured by the gradual, visible growth of the fabric on the loom. A single inch of finished cloth may represent a whole day of silent, focused meditation, 1,000 passes of the hand, and 1,000,000 heartbeats. This slow accumulation of human effort creates a profound sense of stillness in the room. You realize that the weaver is not just creating a garment, she is weaving the very passage of the winter into a tangible, heavy form. Each row of wool captures the essence of the house, the scent of the peat smoke, the low murmurs of the elders, and the humid breath of the cattle huddled in the byre, locking the memories of this sanctuary into the fibers forever. In the Norse mind, this physical act is inextricably linked to the spiritual and the mythological foundations of existence. As you listen to the rhythmic collision of the loom weights, your mind inevitably drifts toward the three Norns, the weavers of fate who sit at the roots of the world tree. Yggdrasil, spinning and measuring the destinies of gods and men alike. To the Viking soul, life is not a series of random, chaotic events, but a thread that is spun with care, measured with wisdom, and eventually cut with dignity. The click-clack of the loom is the sound of destiny being manufactured in real time. This philosophy adds a layer of sacred gravity to the atmosphere of the hall. The Longhouse feels less like a mere shelter and more like a temple of endurance. You feel the weight of the threads in your own spirit, a sense of being woven into the safety of the house, connected by invisible strands of wool and shared history to every soul sitting around the crimson glow of the central hearth. The weaver reaches up to adjust a stone weight, and the resulting chime echoes through the vaulted ceiling, a clear bell-like tone that cuts through the muffled lowing of the cattle and the steady hiss of the embers. The repetitive nature of her task creates a flow state that radiates outward, enveloping the entire room in its heavy calm. You find your own breathing beginning to sync with the fall of the weights. Inhale on the click, exhale on the clack. The tension in your neck and shoulders, the last remnants of your struggle against the wind, finally dissolves into the rhythmic certainty of the wool. The darkness in the corners of the room no longer feels oppressive. It feels intentional and soft, a velvet backdrop for the golden threads of the firelight and the silver threads of the loom. As you drift on the very edge of sleep, the sound of the loom becomes a lullaby of structure and purpose, a reminder that while the ice may be 6 feet thick, the work of living continues in the shadows, unhurried, unbreakable, and perfectly whole. As the rhythmic clacking of the loom weights finally settles into a low, ambient hum that vibrates through the floorboards, a new layer of the Longhouse's ancient soul begins to unfurl in the deepening gloom. The evening has reached its most profound and heavy point, that sacred indigo hour, where the physical world feels thin, and the boundaries between the living and the ancestors begin to shimmer and blur. This is the time of the saga, the specific moment when the community gathers not just for the biological warmth of the fire, but for the spiritual warmth of the collective memory. You lean back against a carved oak pillar, feeling the cool, polished grain of the wood against your spine, and you watch as an elder, a man whose face is a weathered map of 1,000 North Atlantic storms, leans forward into the crimson light of the hearth. He does not reach for a book, for there are no books in this world of iron and bone. Instead, he reaches into the vast, silent library of his own mind, pulling forth the threads of a narrative that has survived for generations. His voice, when it finally breaks the stillness, is not a shout, but a low, gravelly resonance that seems to vibrate upward through the earthen floor and settle into the very marrow of your bones. This is the art of the storyteller, the master of the spoken word. And as he begins to speak, the entire atmosphere of the Longhouse undergoes a subtle, magical shift. The crackle of the peat fire and the soft, rhythmic lowing of the cattle in the byre become the ambient score to a cinematic experience of the pure imagination. He tells of the great world ash, the tree that supports the cosmos, whose massive roots are eternally gnawed by the dragon of the deep, and whose high shimmering branches touch the highest reaches of the heavens. He speaks of the gods of the Allfather's relentless and bloody search for cosmic wisdom, and the Thunderer's bone-shattering battles against the frost giants. But he speaks of them as if they were kin, as if their celestial struggles were merely a grander, more mythic version of the struggle currently taking place outside the heavy longhouse door. The language he uses is thick, with poetic riddles that describe the sea as the whale road, and gold as the serpent's bright lair. This intricate imagery forces your brain to engage in a different way, pulling your focus so deeply into the internal landscape of the story that the physical walls of the house seem to dissolve into the mist. Through the medium of his measured voice, you are no longer confined to a smoke-filled hall in the Arctic. You are sailing across a gray, foam-flecked ocean, the cold spray of the North Sea stinging your cheeks and the salt crusting in your hair. You can almost feel the rhythmic, agonizing pull of the oars, and the terrifying, majestic heave of the longship as it climbs the crest of a massive, black wave. The storyteller's pacing is masterful, a deliberate and rhythmic mimicry of the natural world. He allows for long, heavy silences between his sentences, voids of sound that are filled by the haunting howl of the wind outside, making the safety of the firelight feel even more precious and fragile. These silences are not empty spaces. They are the fertile ground where the story takes root in your own heart, where your mind fills in the glittering details of the ice palaces and the dark, pine-scented forests of the mythic past. There's a profound biological comfort in the act of being told a story. It is a return to the earliest days of human consciousness, a time when the rhythmic voice of the tribe was the only shield against the terrors of the prehistoric night. As the elder's voice rises and falls in a hypnotic, chanting cadence, you feel your brainwaves begin to slow, shifting from the sharp, jagged peaks of alertness into the long, rolling swells of a deep meditative state. Community around you is equally enthralled, held in a collective trance. You see the children, their eyes wide and reflecting the orange embers of the peat, leaning against the elders like small, weary animals in a winter burrow. Even the great hounds have ceased their twitching, their heavy heads resting on their paws as they listen to the low-frequency vibration of the human voice. This is the true function of the saga. It is a social glue, a rhythmic thread that sews the individual into the vast fabric of the culture, ensuring that no one truly feels alone in the face of the infinite, predatory winter. As the narrative reaches its climax, the elder's voice drops to a mere whisper, a sound so fine it is almost indistinguishable from the soft hiss of the dying fire. He speaks of the eventual and inevitable return of the light, the rebirth of the green world, after the catastrophic great winter. It is a promise of hope delivered in the darkest, coldest hour, a reminder that the cycles of the earth are inescapable, and that spring is already dreaming beneath the 6 feet of ice. You feel a deep, resonant peace settle over your entire being, a sense of cosmic perspective that makes your own fatigue feel like a small, manageable thing. These myths are not just entertainment, they are maps for the soul, providing a way to navigate the internal landscape of fear, loss, and endurance. The elder eventually falls silent, leaning back into the deep shadows and leaving the air thick with the weight and magic of his words. The longhouse feels different now. It is no longer just a functional shelter of wood and turf, but a vessel of living history, haunted by the ghosts of heroes and the echoes of ancient gods. You close your eyes, the vivid imagery of the whale road and the world tree still dancing vibrantly behind your eyelids. The voice of the storyteller remains with you, a low, comforting vibration that continues to echo in the marrow of your bones, long after the words have ceased. You are ready now to drift further into the heart of the night, carried by the slow current of an ancient narrative that began long before you were born, and will continue long after the last ember of this hearth has turned to cold ash. The winter is still there, raging against the walls, but through the power of the saga, you have found a way to transcend it, finding a timeless sanctuary within the warmth of the spoken word. As the voice of the storyteller fades into the thick, aromatic haze of the rafters, your attention is drawn to the physical skeleton of the longhouse itself, specifically to the massive oak pillars that march in 2 solemn rows down the length of the hall. In the dying light of the peat fire, these are not merely structural supports, they are the spiritual guardians of the household, alive with the intricate and writhing energy of the north. This is the realm of the shadows on the timber, where the ancient art of wood carving transforms the mundane architecture of the home into a dense, symbolic forest of protection. You lean forward, your eyes adjusting to the deep amber gloom, and you begin to perceive the complex, interlocking patterns that have been bitten into the dark wood by the sharp edge of a chisel. These carvings are the silent stories of the house, a visual manifestation of the Viking soul that exists in the periphery of your vision, watching over the community as they drift toward the threshold of sleep. You reach out a hand, your fingertips tracing the deep, flowing grooves of a serpentine carving on the pillar nearest to your bench. The wood feels cool and incredibly smooth, polished by generations of passing shoulders and the oily residue of 1,000 years of wood smoke. Beneath your touch, you feel the curving lines of a great beast coiling and uncoiling in an endless, rhythmic knot. The lines do not have a beginning or an end. They represent the interconnectedness of all things in the cosmos, a belief that every life, every storm, and every season is woven into a singular, unbreakable fabric. As the firelight flickers, the shadows within the carvings seem to move, giving the impression that the wooden beasts are breathing, shifting their weight in synchronization with the huddling cattle and the sleeping children. This is a deliberate psychological effect designed to make the longhouse feel like a sentient protector, a living entity that is as vigilant as the house spirits it depicts. Further up the pillar, near the bracket that supports the massive roof beams, you discover the grim and noble face of a protector deity, perhaps the All-Father or the brave god of justice. The features are stylized and fierce, with wide staring eyes that seem to pierce through the darkness and the thick smoke to gaze directly at the heavy oak door. These carvings serve as a spiritual lock, a metaphysical barrier that guards the inhabitants against the unseen terrors of the Arctic night. To the people of the north, the wilderness outside is not just cold and wind. It is inhabited by the spirits of the land and the giants who resent the warmth of the human hearth. By carving these guardians into the very bones of the house, the builders have ensured that the sanctuary is never truly unguarded. Even when every human eye in the hall is closed in deep slumber, the wooden eyes of the pillars remain open, standing watch over the vulnerable souls within. You find a profound sense of grounding in the permanence of these carvings. In a world where flesh is fragile and life can be extinguished by a single harsh winter, the oak remains. These pillars have stood for a century, and they will likely stand for another, carrying the stories and the prayers of this family long after they have joined the ancestors in the Great Hall. The repetitive nature of the knotwork, with its undulating loops and hidden animal heads, acts as a visual lullaby. Your eyes follow a single line as it dives under another, emerges, twists, and returns, leading your consciousness on a slow, winding journey that mimics the labyrinthine path of a dream. There is no jaggedness here, no sharp interruptions to the flow of the design. Everything is fluid, everything is balanced, and everything returns to the center. As the hearth fire settles into a deep, pulsing crimson, the shadows on the timber grow longer and more pronounced, turning the walls of the longhouse into a shifting gallery of myth. You realize that you are surrounded by a silent congregation of heroes and monsters, all held in a state of wooden grace. The heavy scent of the old oak, seasoned by the heat of the fire and the salt of the sea air, fills your senses, reinforcing the feeling that you are inside a fortress that is both physical and sacred. You are no longer just a traveler in a cold land. You are a guest in a hall of legends. protected by the ancient magic of the chisel and the enduring strength of the forest. The wood is warm now, having absorbed the radiant energy of the day, and as you rest your head against the carved surface, you can almost hear the faint, low-frequency hum of the timber, a sound of ancient stability that tells you it is finally time to let go. The guardians are awake, the knots are tied, and the shadows are soft. Within this embrace of carved oak and ancestral memory, you are granted the ultimate luxury of the North, a sleep that is profound, protected, and perfectly still. In the deep, velvet stillness of the midwinter night, the Longhouse becomes a profound study in the elemental balance of the North, a silent and ongoing dialogue between the resilient organic warmth of the ancient forest and the cold, unyielding strength of the earth's hidden minerals. As you shift your weight upon the raised earthen bench, your hand happens to brush against two distinct and contrasting textures that define the very physical essence of the Viking Age. The soot-darkened, centuries-old oak of the massive support pillars, and the wrought, hand-hammered iron of the hearth tools and the heavy doorbolts. This is the duality of the iron and the oak, a tangible manifestation of a culture that exists forever at the razor's edge of survival and artistry. In this sanctuary, the oak is the flesh of the house, providing a supple, breathing environment that absorbs and holds the heat of the central fire, while the iron is the bone, providing the structural integrity and the defensive bite that keeps the predatory wilderness of the frost at bay. You run your fingers slowly along the surface of a nearby timber, feeling the immense and silent history contained within the deep, rolling grain of the wood. This oak was a sapling reaching for the pale sun long before the first longship ever tasted the salt of the North Sea, and in its seasoned maturity, it has become a vast reservoir of thermal energy. Unlike the stones of the hearth, which radiate a sharp and sometimes aggressive heat, the oak offers a slow, honey-like warmth that seems to seep out of the wood and directly into your skin. It is a soft heat, a comforting and low-frequency vibration that tells of deep roots and slow, patient growth. The wood is saturated with the dark oils of the hearth smoke and the faint, briny scent of the coastal air, creating a surface that is as smooth as polished bone, but as warm as a living limb. To the people of the North, the tree is a cousin to humanity, and as you lean your forehead against the cool, firm pillar, you can almost feel that ancestral connection, a grounding sensation that anchors your wandering consciousness to the very center of the stable earth. Contrasting this organic softness is the cold, silent authority of the wrought iron. You look toward the heavy oak door, where the massive iron latch bolt reflects the dying crimson pulse of the embers. This iron was born in the suffocating, white-hot intensity of the charcoal forge, hammered into its final shape by the rhythmic, bone-shaking blows of a master blacksmith's mallet, and quenched in the freezing mineral-rich waters of a mountain stream. It carries with it a different kind of energy, a sharp, disciplined power that represents the human will to impose order and safety upon a chaotic, frozen world. When you touch the iron handle of a heavy cooking cauldron or the dark hilt of a nearby knife, the initial sensation is a sharp jolt of clarity, a metallic chill that reminds you of the lethal frost waiting just inches away on the other side of the thick turf walls. But as you continue to hold the metal, it begins to drink in the heat of your own palm, slowly transforming from a cold intruder into a warm, dependable ally. This is the quiet miracle of the North, that even the hardest and coldest materials can be tamed by the constant presence of the hearth and the steady touch of the human hand. This delicate balance of materials creates a profound and lasting psychological sense of security within the vaulted hall. The oak provides the comfort of the womb, the soft, yielding embrace of a home that breathes in synchronization with its inhabitants. The iron provides the certainty of the fortress, the unbreakable locks, and the sharp, functional tools that ensure the fire never goes out and the door never yields to the pressure of the storm. You find yourself mesmerized by the way the firelight plays across these two distinct surfaces, how the dark oak seems to swallow the light, turning it into a deep internal glow, while the iron catches the flickering light and throws it back in sharp, dancing sparks. It is a complex dance of shadow and reflection, a visual and tactile lullaby that speaks of absolute stability and permanence. In a world of shifting snows and melting ice, the iron and the oak remain unchanged and unmoving, a testament to the fact that you are standing on solid ground, protected by the very best that the forest and the forge have to offer. As you drift further into the indigo depths of the night, the distinction between these two textures begins to blur and soften in your mind. The organic warmth of the wood and the unyielding strength of the metal merge into a single protective envelope that surrounds your spirit. You feel the heavy grounding weight of the longhouse pressing down firmly upon the frozen earth, a massive, silent anchor in the churning white sea of the blizzard. The iron and the oak are not just materials of construction. They are the silent, eternal guardians of your rest, ensuring that the boundaries of your sanctuary are absolute and sovereign. Within this hall, the wood will not break, and the iron will not bend. You surrender finally to the heavy weight of the firs, letting the ancient, mineral scent of the iron and the deep, resinous perfume of the oak guide you toward a sleep that is as solid as the pillars and as secure as the bolts. The night is long, and the wind is fierce, but you are held in an embrace of iron and wood, and here, in the heart of the great north, you are finally, irrevocably safe. As the night reaches its absolute zenith, and the activity within the longhouse falls into a rhythmic and unified stillness, the focus of the entire hall shifts toward the singular, pulsing heart of the home. This is the meditation on the living essence of the hearth, a deep exploration of the flickering deity that must be fed, respected, and eventually put to rest with the same care one would give to a weary traveler. You watch from the shadows of your heavy wool furs as the master of the house performs the final duty of the day, a silent ceremony of ash and coal that has remained unchanged since the first stones were laid upon the frozen earth. The fire has transformed from the roaring, ambitious flame of the evening into a concentrated and stable bed of glowing crimson embers. This is the fire in its most potent and steady form, radiating a thick, penetrating heat that seems to bypass the skin and warm the very core of your bones. The scent has shifted as well, moving from the sharp, resinous crackle of birch bark to the heavy, primal aroma of slow-burning peat and seasoned oak heartwood. This scent is the ultimate aromatic sedative, a perfume of carbon and ancient earth that signals to your brain that the day's labor is finished. You find yourself hypnotized by the movement of the coals, which pulse with a slow, internal light, shifting from brilliant orange to a ghostly, translucent violet as the oxygen flows around them in the dimming hall. The ritual of the hearth resting is a slow and deliberate performance of survival. With a heavy iron shovel, the master gently begins to pull the outer perimeter of fine white ash over the glowing core. This is not an act of extinguishing the fire, but a sophisticated act of preservation. By blanketing the embers in their own spent remains, the heat is trapped and insulated, allowed to simmer in a state of suspended animation throughout the long freezing hours of the subarctic night. This sleeping fire is a promise of continuity. It ensures that when the household wakes in the blue, frost-covered dawn, they will not have to struggle with flint and steel against the biting cold, but can simply breathe life back into the embers that survived the dark. You feel a profound sense of security in this gesture, a realization that the spark of life is being guarded even while the community sleeps. As the bright light of the open flame is veiled by the gray ash, the longhouse plunges into a rich, velvety dimness. The shadows that were dancing on the rafters now settle into a soft, unmoving indigo. The only light that remains is a faint, rhythmic glow that bleeds through the microscopic cracks in the ash, appearing like the steady heartbeat of a subterranean giant. This low-frequency light is perfectly tuned to the closing of your eyes, providing just enough visual anchor to keep the darkness from feeling empty, yet soft enough to allow the dream state to begin its slow ascent. You listen to the final sounds of the hearth, the tiny, crystalline pings of the stones as they contract in the cooling air, and the soft, dry whisper of the shifting ash. These are the voices of the fire, a series of microscopic echoes that tell you the sanctuary is sealed and the spirit of the house is at rest. There is a spiritual weight to this moment, a feeling that you are partaking in an ancient covenant between humanity and the elements. By tending the hearth, the people acknowledge their dependence on the flame, and in return, the flame grants them a reprieve from the absolute zero of the Arctic void. You find yourself breathing in synchronization with the pulsing embers, your own internal heat mirroring the steady, muffled glow of the stones. The boundaries of your physical body seem to expand and soften, merging with the warm air of the hall, until you are no longer an isolated individual, but a vital part of the collective warmth of the house. The silence that follows the resting of the fire is not a hollow silence. It is a heavy, meaningful quiet that is pregnant with the deep dreams of the North. The spirits of the ancestors, the guardians of the timber, and the breath of the livestock all seem to coalesce around the sleeping hearth, creating a dense field of protection that wraps around your spirit like a second cloak. You feel a final wave of relaxation wash over you, a deep, cellular surrender to the night. The work of the day is buried safely beneath the ash. The embers of your mind are settled, and the spirit of the hearth has taken its watchful station. Within this golden, smoky womb, you are free to descend into the furthest reaches of sleep, knowing that the fire is breathing for you, waiting for the morning, and holding the fragile world together in its warm, crimson hands. The Longhouse has reached a state of olfactory saturation, a dense and layered atmosphere that defines the sensory world of the North. This is the scent of the old pine, a deep resinous perfume that has been distilled over centuries of cold and fire. As you settle deeper into the hollow of your sleeping firs, the air you breathe feels thick and nutritious, a tonic of wood and earth that enters your lungs with a cooling, medicinal clarity. It is not a single scent, but a complex tapestry of aromatic history. At its base is the ancient foundational smell of the seasoned pine and spruce timbers that form the skeleton of the hall. These logs, harvested from the dark, snow-choked forests of the interior, continue to bleed microscopic beads of amber resin even decades after they were felled. In the warmth of the rising hearth smoke, this sap vaporizes, releasing a sharp, clean fragrance of needles and forest floor that cuts through the heavier domestic smells of the house. This evergreen foundation is overlain by the darker, more industrial scent of the wood smoke itself, the ghost of ghosts. 1,000 years of peat fires and oak logs. It is a dry, carbonized aroma, carrying the essence of the bog and the deep history of the compressed mosses that have burned. Throughout the winter, this smoke has permeated every fiber of the Longhouse, from the thick wool hangings to the very pores of your skin, creating a persistent, smoky veil that acts as a natural antimicrobial shield. It is the scent of permanence, the smell of a fire that has never truly been allowed to die. Mingled with this is the soft organic musk of the lanolin from the heavy wool blankets and the faint, sweet smell of the dry sedge grass that lines your boots. These scents are the markers of human presence, the comforting evidence of a life that is lived in intimate, constant contact with the animal and botanical kingdoms. As you inhale, you can detect the subtle metallic tang of the cold air that manages to seep through the microscopic gaps in the turf walls, a sharp, ozonic needle that keeps the interior air from becoming stagnant. This sliver of frost provides a perfect contrast to the warm, humid breath of the cattle, huddled in the far byre, whose presence adds a low, earthy note of clover and warm hide to the room. This is the scent of a functioning ecosystem, a balanced environment where every living thing contributes to the collective survival. You find that your pulse begins to slow in response to this aroma. There is a deep evolutionary trigger in the smell of wood smoke and pine. It signals to the brain that the pack is safe, the fire is tended, and the predators are kept at bay. It is the primal scent of the sanctuary. The air feels heavy and soft, like a physical weight pressing against your chest, encouraging you to let go of the last remnants of the day's tension. You are breathing in the forest, the hearth, and the history of your ancestors all at once. The scent of the pine is a bridge to the wilderness outside, a reminder that even within the fortress of the Longhouse, you are still a part of the great green world that sleeps beneath the snow. This aroma does not demand your attention. It simply envelopes you, a silent, fragrant guardian that lulls your senses into a state of total surrender. The sharp edges of your thoughts are blunted by the resinous haze, and you find yourself drifting on a sea of amber and ash. Within this cloud of old pine and ancient smoke, the world is reduced to the simple, rhythmic act of breathing. You inhale the strength of the timber. You exhale the fatigue of the journey, and you sink deeper into the fragrant velvet dark of the north. As the final whispers of a settling ash fade into the porous grain of the oak pillars, the Longhouse enters a state of absolute, profound equilibrium, known as the Great Stillness. This is the moment where the internal world of the hall finally disconnects from the external world of the storm, creating a vacuum of peace so deep it feels like a physical presence against your skin. You lie motionless beneath the heavy lanolin-scented wool, and for the first time, you can hear the true silence of the north, a silence that is not the absence of sound, but a dense, humming frequency of total rest. The frantic energy of the day, the chopping of wood, the hauling of water, and the rhythmic clatter of the loom have all been processed and distilled into this single crystalline point of stasis. Even the cattle in the byre have reached a collective truce with the night, their heavy breathing falling into a synchronized, subterranean rhythm that serves as a low-frequency foundation for the silence of the humans. In this stillness, your senses become hyper-attuned to the microscopic life of the house. You hear the occasional, solitary snap of a cooling timber, a sound like a distant parting of ice, as the massive roof beams contract in the grip of the encroaching frost. You hear the soft, dry rustle of the straw bedding far across the hall, as a child shifts in their sleep, a sound as delicate as a bird's wing brushing against silk. These tiny punctuations of noise do not break the stillness. They define it, acting as silver needles that stitch the fabric of the silence even tighter. The air has become perfectly stationary, a warm and amber-tinted medium that holds you in a state of weightlessness. You feel as though you are suspended in the very heart of a giant, ancient tree, protected by layers of bark, turf, and time from the predatory vacuum of the Arctic sky. Beyond the thick, reinforced walls of the hall, the blizzard continues its blind and mindless rage. But here, in the heart of the great stillness, the storm has no power. The howling of the wind has been transformed by the insulation of the earth into a faint, oceanic roar, a sound so distant it feels like the memory of a sea you sailed a lifetime ago. This disconnection is the ultimate victory of the Viking sanctuary. You are no longer a victim of the elements. You are a sovereign of the interior. The stillness is a fortress of the mind, a place where the anxieties of the future and the regrets of the past are dissolved in the steady, rhythmic pulse of the present moment. Your thoughts, once jagged and fast, have slowed to the pace of the creeping glaciers, becoming smooth, rounded, and heavy with the promise of rest. There is a strange and beautiful timelessness to this hour. In the great stillness, the 9th century and the infinite future are one and the same. You are sharing this silence with every soul who has ever sought refuge from the cold, a communal experience of safety that transcends the individual ego. You feel a deep, cellular gratitude for the solidity of the earth and the integrity of the timber. The stillness enters your blood, cooling the fires of your ambition and quieting the noise of your desires. You are becoming a part of the architecture itself, a silent guardian of the hearth's last heat. The world is reduced to the simple, holy geometry of the longhouse, the vertical strength of the oak, and the horizontal peace of the sleeping benches. As you surrender to this absolute quiet, the boundaries of your conscious mind begin to fray at the edges, melting into the velvety indigo of the rafters. The great stillness is the gateway to the dream state, a neutral territory where the soul prepares for its nightly journey into the mythic landscape of the north. You are no longer waiting for sleep. You are already inhabiting it. The silence is a dark, warm pool, and you are slowly, effortlessly sinking toward the bottom, where the water is still and the light is a soft, eternal amber. The longhouse has done its work. The fire is rested, the spirits are vigilant, and the stillness is absolute. You close your eyes for the final time, letting the weight of the silence carry you over the threshold, into the deep, protected oblivion of the winter night. As the great stillness pulls your physical form into the deep, heavy sediment of relaxation, your consciousness begins to detach from the wooden rafters and the cooling hearth, drifting upward into the fluid and shimmering realm of the dreams of the north. This is the liminal space where the mind, unburdened by the cold reality of survival, begins to weave the raw materials of the day into the mythic tapestry of the subconscious. You are no longer lying on a bench of earth and timber. You are floating upon a vast obsidian sea, the rhythmic heave of the swells beneath you mimicking the slow, steady breathing of the longhouse itself. In this dream state, the whale road is not a place of danger, but a path of liquid silver, illuminated by a moon that hangs like a polished shield in a sky of infinite violet silk. You feel the cool, salt-tinged mist against your phantom skin, a sensation that is both bracing and profoundly soothing, a reminder of the boundless horizons that define the Viking spirit. The dreams of the north are not chaotic or fragmented. They are atmospheric and vast, echoing the scale of the fjords and the ancient glaciers. You find yourself walking through a forest of towering white pines, where the snow beneath your feet does not crunch but flows like powdered diamonds. The trees are not merely wood, but crystalline pillars that hum with a low-frequency music, the same rhythmic chime of the loom weights you heard earlier in the evening. Each branch is heavy with the weight of stars, and as you pass, they release a soft, luminous dust that smells of ozone and ancient resin. This is the dream of the primordial forest, the ancestral memory of the world before the first axe was forged. It is a place of absolute purity and silence, where the only movement is the slow, majestic dance of the aurora borealis, overhead curtains of emerald, violet, and ghost white light that fold and unfold across the heavens like the silk hangings of a celestial hall. As you drift deeper into this visionary landscape, the faces of the sagas begin to appear in the periphery of your mind, not as fierce warriors, but as translucent, benevolent guardians of the dream. You see the All-Father walking among the silver trees, his cloak trailing behind him like a cloud of evening mist, his presence a silent guarantee that the wisdom of the ages is watching over your rest. You see the great ships of the ancestors, their prows carved into the likeness of dragons, sailing silently through the air above the pines, their oars moving in a slow, hypnotic unison that lulls your spirit into an even deeper state of surrender. These images are the psychic anchors of your heritage, providing a sense of continuity and belonging that transcends the waking world. You are not an isolated soul lost in the winter. You are a vital thread in a narrative that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward to the rebirth of the world. The dreams begin to soften further, the sharp imagery of the forest and the sea melting into a warm, golden haze that mirrors the glow of the hidden hearth embers. You feel a sense of profound weightlessness, as if the gravity of the earth has been replaced by the gentle buoyancy of a warm spring. The sounds of the longhouse, the distant lowing of a cow, the snap of a cooling beam are reinterpreted by your dreaming mind as the songs of whales or the shifting of celestial ice. There is no fear here, no cold, and no hunger. There is only the vast rhythmic pulse of the north, a heartbeat that is identical to your own. You are being carried by a current of pure peace, a river of light that flows through the center of the cosmos and into the very heart of your being. As the dream state reaches its deepest point, the boundaries between the self and the universe disappear entirely. You are the wind, you are the timber, you are the stars, and you are the ancient, sleeping fire. The dreams of the north have done their work, transforming the fatigue of the journey into a source of spiritual power. You are sinking now into a layer of sleep that is beyond images, beyond stories, and beyond time. It is a state of pure, undiluted existence, a dark and warm sanctuary where the soul is replenished and the spirit is made whole. The north is dreaming through you, and in this shared vision you find the ultimate rest. You surrender to the golden haze, letting the last echoes of the world fade away as you descend into the profound and sacred oblivion of the winter night. Outside the thick insulating walls of the turf-covered hall, the absolute black of the midwinter night begins its slow, imperceptible transition into the blue dawn. This is not the bright, golden sunrise of the southern lands, but a haunting, ethereal glow that belongs exclusively to the high latitudes, a deep, sapphire twilight that filters through the heavy snowdrifts and the small, translucent horn windows of the roof. As you linger in the final shallow layers of sleep, this cool azure light begins to permeate the interior of the longhouse, turning the plumes of lingering wood smoke into drifting ribbons of ghostly silver. The blue dawn is the breath of the Arctic winter, a silent and majestic herald that the longest night has once again been defeated by the steady, rhythmic persistence of the Earth's rotation. It is a moment of profound clarity, where the warmth of the hearth and the chill of the morning air exist in a state of perfect, shivering tension. You find yourself suspended in a state of blissful semi-consciousness, watching the way the blue light catches the frost that has crystallized around the iron bolts of the main door. Each tiny ice crystal sparkles like a microscopic diamond, a silent testament to the predatory cold that has spent the last 12 hours trying to find a way into your sanctuary. But the longhouse has held firm. You feel a surge of quiet triumph in the marrow of your bones, a deep-seated realization that you have survived another night in the heart of the north. The blue light spreads slowly across the earthen floor, illuminating the scattered straw and the heavy oak chests, giving the familiar domestic space the appearance of a submerged underwater kingdom. The world is soft, quiet, and bathed in a color that feels like the essence of peace, itself a shade of blue, so deep and pure that it seems to wash away the last remnants of fatigue from your spirit. The sounds of the house begin to change with the arrival of this new light. The cattle in the byre sense the shift in the atmosphere, their lowing becoming a bit more rhythmic and expectant, a warm melodic sound that resonates through the timber walls like a distant cello. You hear the first faint stirrings of the household, the dry rustle of a wool blanket, the soft thud of a boot on the packed earth, and the rhythmic scraping of the hearth shovel as the master prepares to awaken the sleeping fire. These are not interruptions to your rest. They are the gentle acoustic signposts of a world returning to life. The blue dawn provides a visual lullaby that bridges the gap between the mythic landscapes of your dreams and the physical reality of the morning. It is a time of quiet reflection, a threshold where you can look back at the darkness of the night with gratitude and forward to the light of the day with a calm, steady resolve. The air in the hall is at its most crisp and vital during this hour. Every breath you take feels like a draught of cold mountain water, clearing the cobwebs of sleep from your lungs and sharpening your senses. The scent of the old pine and the cooling ash is still present, but it is now joined by the sharp ozonic tang of the fresh snow that has piled up against the ventilation slats. This combination of scents creates a feeling of total renewal, as if the night has scrubbed your soul clean. You lie there for a few more moments, wrapped in the fading warmth of your furs, letting the blue light bathe your face. This is the reward for the endurance of the winter traveler. The sight of the world reborn in sapphire and silver, a moment of absolute beauty that makes the hardships of the journey feel like a small price to pay for such a vision. As the blue begins to pale into a soft, pearlescent gray, you feel a deep and lasting sense of alignment with the natural cycles of the north. You are no longer fighting the winter. You are moving with it, a part of its slow and frigid pulse. The blue dawn has granted you a final meditative pause before the activity of the day begins, a sanctuary within a sanctuary. You take one last, deep breath of the indigo air, feeling the strength of the oak and the protection of the iron flowing through you. The night is over, the light has returned, and you are standing on the threshold of a new beginning, held in the calm azure embrace of the Arctic morning. The world is cold, but you are warm. The world is vast, but you are home. As the pale, pearlescent glow of the morning begins to climb the heavy turf walls, the journey through the Viking night reaches its final circular conclusion. The eternal return. This is the profound understanding that the longhouse, the fire, and the storm are all part of a sacred, repeating loop that has no beginning and no end. You feel the deep, rhythmic pull of the earth as it turns, a sensation of being perfectly seated within the great wheel of the north. The fatigue of the previous day has been fully transmuted into a quiet, steady strength, a reservoir of ancestral energy that sits heavy and warm in your chest. You are no longer just a guest in this hall. You have become a part of its very molecular structure, a living thread woven into the ancient tapestry of the iron and the oak. The air in the longhouse is now a masterpiece of stillness, a thin blue haze of sweet wood smoke that hangs suspended in the morning light like a veil of frozen time. You look at the massive oak pillars, their carved guardians now appearing soft and familiar in the dawn, and you realize that they will be here long after the snow melts, and long after the next winter returns to claim the land. There is a profound comfort in this permanence. The struggle of the night was not a battle to be won, but a dance to be joined, a seasonal rite of passage that cleanses the spirit and fortifies the soul. You are a child of the rhythm, a traveler of the whale road, who has found the ultimate anchorage in the heart of the storm. As the master of the house breathes the first bright spark of life back into the hidden embers of the hearth, a tiny golden star of fire blooms in the center of the hall. This is the eternal return, the light that always comes back, the warmth that never truly vanishes, and the hope that is buried beneath the ash. You watch the smoke curl upward toward the sky, a silent prayer of gratitude for the sanctuary of the night. Your eyes are heavy, not with the exhaustion of the journey, but with the deep, saturated peace of a soul that has found its home. The world outside is vast, cold, and indifferent, but inside these walls, you are known, you are protected, and you are cherished by the old gods and the living timber. The cycle is complete. The night has given you its wisdom, the fire has given you its strength, and the silence has given you your rest. You feel the weight of the wool furs one last time, a gentle, grounding pressure that tells you the work of sleep is done. You are ready to step into the white, shimmering world of the day, carrying the stillness of the longhouse within you like a hidden talisman. The north has claimed you, not as a victim, but as a kin. You belong to the frost, to the flame, and to the endless beautiful repetition of the seasons. The journey is over, yet it is only beginning again. You close your eyes for one final, blissful moment of reflection, breathing in the scent of the pine, and the promise of the dawn. The sanctuary is yours, the fire is lit, and the path is clear. Good night, traveler of the north. May your dreams be as deep as the fjords and your spirit as resilient as the oak. Rest now, for the light has returned, and you are finally, eternally home.